Hello, you're watching World Talks, and I'm your host, Klaudia Czerwińska. Last weekend saw another massive wave of protests sweep through Serbia's capital, Belgrade. A protest that brought together close to 300,000 people became one of the largest rallies in decades, as thousands of marching students, many traveling hundreds of miles on foot or by bike, descended on Serbia's capital. To discuss the latest, I'm joined by Ivanka Popović, professor at the Faculty of Technology and Metallurgy in Belgrade, who served as the rector of the University of Belgrade and vice president of the European University Association, but is now also a ProGlas activist that organizes the protests. Hello, and thank you for joining me on the program.
Very nice to see you.
Before we begin, let's hear Alexander Vucic's what he had to actually say after the protest which took place over the weekend, because I would like to get your comment on that in just a moment.
We got the message. Everyone in power needs to understand the message. When so many people are protesting, we are going to have to change and learn from it. On the other hand, I also hope that others have understood the message coming from majority in Serbia, that the citizens of Serbia do not want color revolutions, that the citizens of Serbia do not want violence, and that the citizens of Serbia want to change power through elections.
From what we heard so far from that short excerpt from Alexander Vucic's speech, what is your commentary?
Well, I would have to bring into question the sincerity of Mr. Vucic's speech yesterday. So I think it's very important to note that there were some things in his words that don't quite ring true. And the student protests, or the student-led protests so far, have been peaceful. There have been no incidents. The incidents have been instigated by the authorities. So this in itself is a gross overstatement that he is the one standing and desiring peace. And I also have to say that this mass protest that we had on Saturday, with about 300,000 people participating, students and citizens, was actually interrupted by an incident that it's difficult to say what exactly happened, but it seemed to have been a sonic weapon that was aimed at the peaceful demonstrators during commemorative 15 minutes of silence for the victims of the Novi Sad tragedy. And this has led to the, let's say, first of all, disruption, a bit of panic that broke out, and about 700 people have come forward with complaints about health issues at various medical facilities. So I can say that this is far from over, and this type of use of alleged use of illegal weapons is something that has made people even more determined to bring about a change, of course, by legal means, because from the very beginning, this was always a peaceful protest with a desire for change. And Mr. Vucic, I think, is sorely mistaken if he thinks that his narrative will be able to continue as it has done so far.
So this sort of narrative and the use of force, is it actually a signal to those who are protesting that those protests might be actually taking them somewhere, especially when it comes to upholding democracy?
Absolutely, because I think the protesters were expecting some kind of provocations, hoodlums, people that would start physical altercations during or some kind of interruptions of the protest. But this was such a, I would have to say, sneaky and dishonest way of hurting peaceful demonstrators. And if your government is willing to go with violence against its own people, I think we're coming to a very serious point in our country's history where the citizens will not stop until a change is achieved. So yes, this unfortunate incident will turn out to be, let's say, a stimulus for further protests, because it's clear that we are not safe in our own country.
As unfortunate as it is, do you think that we're going to see more violence and more escalation when it comes to the protesters and those who serve the government?
Well, the protesters are certainly the ones that will not instigate any violence as far as the government is concerned and its forces. That I really cannot say. It's up to Mr. Vucic, who, as you know, he as the president of the republic has no prerogatives in executive government, but he has usurped these powers. So we will see what happens. But definitely violence will not come from the protesters and from the students.
And how would you assess the role of the national media in spreading this narrative that those are violent protests from the beginning, from the very root?
As you know, Serbia is a country that is a captured state, so the media are also from the with national frequencies are fully controlled by the government, and the narrative in the media controlled by Mr. Vučić has been that the demonstrators are violent, not vice versa. So I think they will continue to portray the skewed picture of what is going on here, and they will actually continue to deepen the divide that exists in the population. But the students, on the other hand, with their marches through Serbia, they have gone through so many villages and towns, going to larger protests, and also the various local activities and protests that have occurred in more than 400 towns and villages in Serbia. They have awakened the population to a different reality that we are living. So I think it will not be easy for Mr. Vučić in the future to sell his version of reality in Serbia.
You surely are in touch with those who take part in the protests, with those students who are out there on the streets fighting for democracy. What's the mood like? And do you think that the students are actually hopeful that this is the moment in time, this is the moment in history where they will be able to turn the tables?
Well, I think they're very aware of the role that they are now playing in society, that they are the drivers of change, and they are very determined to continue, and not only to continue, but to actually bring about the change. And also they are very determined not to be, let's say, politically active in terms of party engagement. They would like to pressure the government into abiding by the constitution, abiding by the law, that we simply function as a country with rule of law. Whether this will be possible or whether there will have to be some kind of a temporary transitional government that will bring about this change, this remains to be seen. But the students will not stop. And because of the incidents that have been occurring, the citizens are fully supporting the students in their actions.
So how much longer do you think that Vučić will be able to hold off the growing waves of protests from affecting his position? I mean, there has to be some sort of a timeline to this because those protests will continue, as we know now. And what would be the plan for change?
Well, I agree with you that there is a timeline, but it's very difficult to define how long this will take, because Mr. Vučić could or might be linked, or let's say the corruption that is going on in this country, the rampant corruption, might be linked to the highest areas of power in this country. So any type of a true change that would occur in this country would probably endanger the ruling party, and therefore they see this as a fight for their own political existence, and that's why they will not give up. On the other hand, the young people in this country see it as their only chance of a reasonable future in this country. And I think they have chosen to stay in the country rather than to emigrate. So I think we're seeing actually an existential struggle on both sides, and I'm sure that the citizens will prevail.
But I think it's very, very important to stress this, that this is not only the students who are participating in those protests. There are also other people, other social groups from Serbia that are actively taking part. Am I correct?
Yes, this is correct. There is actually no social group that has been left untouched by the corruption and mismanagement of this government. So you have a lot of dissatisfied people who are living under oppression, and simply maybe what we can say is that the student protests have lifted the fear that many people have felt that they are not able to express their dissatisfaction. Now, after seeing the students, many people have simply come alive and they want to join in this movement, and they are participating people that you would not expect to be engaged socially. So we're seeing an awakening of active citizenship in Serbia, and I think it's a very good change, because for too many years the citizens or the population has more or less been allowing the ruling party to make all the relevant decisions for them, which is in no way, the prerogative of a functioning democracy. So what we see now is really the democratic process kicking in, and we're seeing active participation of an increasing number of citizens of this country. And I think this is one of the biggest achievements of the student movement.
It seems to be the case that the EU is waiting and watching, assuming that this is a domestic problem of Serbia. What is your opinion about that? Does the situation in Serbia have a ricochet effect on its relationship with the EU, especially in terms of the EU accession?
Well, I think the situation is it's a waiting game, I think, for the EU, because the EU has a transactional relationship with Mr. Vučić. He has been serving his purpose for some time, and he has been delivering some expectations of the EU. On the one hand, on the other hand, the EU has turned a blind eye to the obvious autocratic tendencies that he has. But I think also the time has come for that the EU can no longer tolerate what's going on in Serbia. And if the EU means to uphold its values across all of continental Europe, I think the EU will have to take a more active position in what's going on in Serbia, especially due to the accession process, that even though it has slowed down, and I think it has slowed down in many respects because Mr. Vucic has slowed down the process, is not really a willing player in this process. But if Serbia is to move forward and align with the European Union, there has to be a change in government in this country.
I know that our time, unfortunately, is coming to an end, but before we go, I wanted to ask you a question that I asked you upon our last talk in the studio. If you could share one poignant message with the people outside of Serbia who might not be up to speed, let's say, with the latest events, what would it be?
I would say that they should view what is going on in Serbia as an active show of democracy in action, and then that because of this democracy in the streets that we are witnessing now, that we really expect the support of our European co-citizens.
Thank you so much, Ivanka Popović, professor at the University of Belgrade and a ProGlas activist. It's a pleasure to have you on the show, as always. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And so this would be all for now here on World Talks, but please do stay tuned. We're back in just a moment with more news and features here on TVP World.